We are live. Good evening from the UK. It's about 7:30. It's a good Friday. Hope you've all had a good day. As you can see by the title, this one is for my people out there who are in the streets, putting their ego on the line and aren't yielding much results. So, as you can see by the title, this one is for anyone who is struggling with cold approach, which is obviously I think is going to be a very relatable topic for anybody who's actually putting themselves out there. And so this live stream is specifically for that type of individual. If you're somebody who is putting themselves out there and has put in a good number of reps, then yeah, this is for you. So hopefully this will be somewhat comforting in your journey. So let's just get right into it. So obviously the first point I want to make is that cold approach isn't easy. Now, most of you know this because, ironically, if you're struggling with cold approach, then you know that this isn't easy because you've had rough days. Maybe you've had a couple of bad interactions or bad reactions. Maybe you're not getting any dates, or every number you get is flaking on you, or the girls accept your Instagram request and then they delete it right away, or they remove you as a follower, or they unfollow you, right? This could be manifesting in a number of ways. Either way, you're not getting what you want, right? So, the point that I really want to lead with is that this isn't meant to be easy, right? So, there might be a misconception online that cold approach is this cheat code in the dating market. People have said this before. And in a way, it is, but that's a very misleading mischaracterization of what cold approach is and how or what it takes to learn the skill set. Because the reality is that it's not some sort of cheat code where you can just type in a couple of numerical and letters or numbers and letters into a video game and then get, you know, some sort of superpower in a short amount of time. That's not how this works. It actually takes some level of effort. And that level of effort is different for everybody, right? So you have to understand where you are in your journey, right? Some people it takes 2, 3 months to get their first date. Other people it takes 6 months. And for some people, I think this is rare, but for some people it takes a year, right? And so everybody is at a different point in their journey based on where they're starting, right? Based on their self-worth, based on how maybe even how old they are, based on their experiences, romantic experiences, based on where they live, based on how they've been brought up. I mean, there are so many different factors that play into how successful you will be with cold approach. So either way, I think regardless of where you're starting out, I think most guys embarking on this journey will find it difficult at the start, right? And so that's the first point that I want to make. Now, it is hard, and so therefore, because it's hard, there will be a period at the start when you suck, right? And embracing that period is important. It doesn't make sense to be annoyed or to be super, super frustrated or to expect to get immediate results just because you're putting yourself out there. Because when I started, I didn't get my first date until pretty much 4 months into my journey. And granted, I wasn't putting as much reps as I thought I was. At the time, I thought I was putting in reps because I was pretty much going out every weekend, apart from a few weekends in December. But, looking back, I could have put in way more volume, right? I could have been going out not just once a week on the weekend, I could have been going out 3 times, right? Now, my location had a part to play in that, but I don't want to deviate from the fact that assuming that you are putting in reps, it can still take time, right? And so you want to be somewhat patient, right? There needs to be patience in this, and don't feel entitled to get results immediately, right? There is a period of acclimatization, of getting used to the skill set, and you just have to submit yourself to that process rather than constantly always looking for the cookie, always looking for the the end goal in mind. So at some level, you have to be outcome dependent, especially at the start, because the reality is that you're probably not going to get the results you want at the start. You might do. I'm not here to say that that won't happen. That can happen. I've seen it happen with some people, right? But just based on my experience, it took me a few months to get what I wanted, right? And so I had to just become outcome dependent and just focus on the reps, focus on the action, focus on iterating on the skill. What's up to everyone in the chat, by the way? So, yes, I had to iterate on the skill and really think about, okay, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? So, my next word of advice is to be self aware, right? So, be self aware about how many reps you are actually putting in. How many times are you actually going out? Do you leave 2 weeks between every session you do to approach? Some guys will say, I've done 50 approaches, and then you ask them, how many approaches have you done? And you've done 50 in 6 months. I mean, there's guys I know that are doing 50 approaches in a week, you know? So you need to be able to self audit, because I'm talking to guys who are doing this by themselves, right? And so you need to be able to have that third person, almost coaching perspective of looking at yourself and going, okay, where could I improve? Where could I put more effort in? Or do I even like where I live? Am I in a good location, etc., etc., right? Now, assuming that you're doing all of that right, I think the last point I'll make about volume is, a good number to aim for is 100 approaches until you really start to see some level of progress. So when I first started, that's the number that was given to me when I came across content, specifically Christian's content, where he suggested that we do 100 direct approaches. And once you cross that 100 barrier, that's when you now get a better idea of what your sticking points are, where you need to improve. And that was certainly the case for me. Now, I got a date by my 50th approach, right? That was when I got my first date from Cold Approach. So I didn't necessarily need to get to 100 to find some level of success. But again, that's just me, right? I still struggled in that first 50. And as I'll discuss later, I still had a rut. I had a rut around the maybe 150, 200 mark, where I just didn't get any dates for like 3 months. 3 months of approaching, did not get any dates, right? So I had like a high, and then I went down to a low and plateaued for a very long time. And it was very frustrating. So yes, it's also a very up and down journey, right? So another point I want to make is that Cold Approach is not a linear journey, right? It's not like going to the gym where you go in, you have your regimen, you eat a certain amount, you have your training splits, and then you progressively overload and get, muscle, build muscle, gain weight or lose weight over time, and you can track it. And it's fairly easy to predict how much you'll gain week by week. The Cold Approach isn't like that, right? Some days you have good days, some days you have bad days, and it's very up and down. Now, from a, let's say, long-term view, you should be able to identify progress. So even though in the more, let's say, in the finer intervals, or let's say on a weekly basis, even though the results might be very volatile, if we zoom out and look at it, let's say from a 3 month perspective, then your 3 month progress should be there, right? You should be making progress in 3 months, which again, I mentioned the fact that I went on a rut, right? The reason I had a rut, I think, is because I got too much in my head and I wasn't able to identify where I was going wrong until I got, some help, outside help. But yes, I would say that's an important thing to consider, right? It's just, just being self-aware and being able to audit yourself is a big one, right? And then the next point I would make, if you're struggling with Cold Approach right now, is to understand that, because it's volatile, at any given moment when you go out to do an approach, you could, meet somebody who completely changes everything, right? So you're essentially just one approach away from everything changing, meaning you might get blown out a few times and you're a little bit disheveled. And instead of wallowing in that sadness or disappointment or frustration, if you just maintain some level of enthusiasm and go in again, you might do an approach, and that just happens to be the girl who's the on girl. She's the girl who's really into you, and she lights up the moment you say hi, and you end up going on your first ever date through that approach. And so it's so funny because this is literally the story of my life. This is the story of my journey where I was just, before I got that first date, I was banging my head against the wall. 10 approaches, 20 approaches, 30 approaches, 40 approaches, 49 approaches, and then approach 50 was the one, right? Now imagine if at approach 49 I said, this just doesn't work. I'm struggling, I'm frustrated, my ego's getting battered, my sense of self worth is getting tested and destroyed with every rejection, every flaky number. I'm starting to doubt myself. I'm even feeling worse than when I started cold approach. Like, imagine if I'd allowed that negativity to stop me from doing approach 50, which is when I met the first girl that I went on a date with. And that completely transformed my perspective because at approach 49, I had a bit of negativity. But then at approach 50, because it went well, all of a sudden I realized, hold on, this can actually work. This could actually work for me. I can actually get results from this. And then that just that momentum snowballs, and you just gain more confidence as you keep on going. And so all it can take is one approach. So don't lose too much enthusiasm. I didn't lose too much enthusiasm. I think the most enthusiasm that I lost was in that 3 month rut because I'd already found success, and so I made the naive mistake of thinking that it would continue to be on that trajectory. Although at some level it should have continued going up because I was getting better, but I didn't realize that there were things that I was missing on or missing. There were things that I wasn't really aware of, but at the same time, I was naive in thinking that it would be plain sailing at that point. And so I was down. I wasn't feeling great. I remember there was one time, uh, you know, I couldn't get any dates. And then I just woke up one morning and I was like, I just can't be bothered to go out and do a session. I can't be bothered to approach. I don't want to. And I just stayed in bed and, did some other stuff like worked. Um, and I was very down bad. And it was kind of understandable because I wasn't getting what I wanted and I was putting in reps, right? And so it's understandable, but you have to pick yourself back up, right? Especially in my case because I'd already had positive reference experiences, right? So that was a big deal. So I would say, yeah, always remain optimistic because you never know who's around the corner. There could be one person around the corner who could literally change everything. I experienced that here before I got coached. I experienced it after I got coached. I experienced it when I was in Thailand. I've experienced it so many times where I'll get blown out, and then the approach after that is a wonderful experience. I mean, the girl I'm seeing now, before I approached her, I got blown out, right? I had a pretty, yeah, I wouldn't say it was a brutal blowout, but I didn't get the girl to stop, and then I kept on walking, and then I saw this girl. I approached her, boom, date, and now we're seeing each other. And then it's funny because after her, I approached another girl, and I ended up going on a date with her as well. So I got two dates, but let's remember that if we rewind to the beginning of the session before I met those two girls, then I got blown out, right? So, of course, I'm speaking as somebody who's already had positive experiences, already been on dates. So, to the guys who are struggling, maybe you can't relate to what I'm saying because you haven't had any dates, right? You haven't had any concrete success. Maybe you've gotten numbers, but you haven't got dates. And so, to you, I would say you need to, you know, really take a look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself what could be going wrong. Not look in the mirror because of how you look. I just mean internally in terms of your self-belief, or are you rejecting yourself on their behalf? Are you going in with half an ass? Do you think you're actually putting conviction into your approach? And this is why it's so difficult to offer advice because I'm going to motivate you guys and I hope I can push you guys to continue going. But at some point, if you are continuously banging your head against the wall, then obviously, there's that famous saying of insanity is trying the same thing again and again and expecting different results, right? So you can't keep making the same mistakes and expect a different outcome. But of course, I somewhat empathize because you might not be able to see what those mistakes are, but you have to try your hardest, which means recording yourself, which means trying to spot like some positive trends with, which interactions tend to go well and why do I think they went well, and which ones didn't go as well and why do I think that didn't go well. But there's just so much in this process. You have to audit the open, the conversation, how you closed, were you tepid, were you 50-50 on the fence when it came to asking for her number, were you super nervous, did you just ask a bunch of questions, fire away a bunch of questions, or were you present? There's so many different factors that could be, essentially messing you up or tripping you up in this process. And it just takes a very self-aware person to know what that is. So yeah, I would say remain optimistic, but if you're making the same mistakes and you're not getting anything and you've been doing this for months and months and months and months and months, then, the proof is in the pudding. You need to get someone else to audit your approaches. You need to find somebody who can help you, you know, fix your issues. Otherwise, you're just going to become cynical and you will give up at some point. Because, like I said, this isn't easy, right? This really holds a mirror up to who you are. This really has you questioning your entire identity as a man. You start wondering, am I destined for loneliness? Am I unlovable? Am I a piece of shit? Am I ugly? Am I ever going to get a girlfriend? You start asking these questions if you keep on failing, if you keep on struggling. And you might even come at the end of it worse because, you've just put yourself through all this rejection for nothing, right? And it can be a very tough reality to face. But hopefully you're not going to go down that path, right? If you just have the right mentality and if you can take off or remove your ego for a second and really understand what's going on here, because it shouldn't take you so many months to get your first date. It really shouldn't, right? If you've been coached and if you've applied feedback properly and you're following, somebody's advice, then it should only be a matter of time until you get dates, and it will happen quicker than you think. That's what it was for me. When I got coached, it happened way faster than I thought. And so yeah, I would say just understand that that's part of the process, right? And then another word of advice I would give to guys who are struggling is, if you believe that you are someone who is dateable and you believe that you should be seeing success at some point, you're just in this really shitty phase of getting better, then I would encourage you to think of this not just as a way to get dates, but as a way to elevate yourself, a way to improve your confidence, right? This is not just a way to get dates. This is a big reason why I'm passionate about Cold Approach is because I don't just see it as a way to get dates, a way to get laid, a way to get girlfriend. I see it as a self-development tool that really changes who you are at your core, and it really forces you to become a better version of yourself. And through that process, you transform, right? You show up in the world differently, you walk differently, you talk differently, you become way more courageous in other areas of life, you take way more risks. And so there's a lot of benefit to this aside from just the dates, which is funny because I'm at the place now where I get the dates, I've had the dates, and I've had the experiences, and I still want more experiences, and I will continue to get more experiences in terms of romance and, you know, girlfriends and flings and all that sort of good stuff. But, recently, as I've been reflecting more on what I've actually gained from this skill set, it's really a lot deeper than just the pussy, to keep it blunt, right? It's not just about that. It's a lot more about the internal development that I've gained from it. And so if you can just view the person you're becoming as the goal to some degree, as well as the goal of getting dates, then the process becomes a little bit easier, right? Because then it's like, well, yeah, I'm facing a lot of rejection. I'm getting flaked on because I'm in this early period and I'm still dealing with growing pains as an early well, as somebody who's early on in the skill. But that being said, I'm still gaining confidence, right? I'm still putting myself out there. I'm still facing that social judgment or perceived social judgment. I'm still improving my ability to deal with the spotlight. Trying to get better at conversations, which will benefit me in the long run. So you just really need to watch you just need to sort of view the skill from a different perspective, right? Like take off your glasses and put on a different pair of glasses and view it from a different lens rather than the lens of, oh, I'm just doing this to get laid. Of course that's what we get into it for, right? But I think just let's try and transcend this aspect of just wanting to get laid, right? And let's try to see the other benefits, because then it's more about you, right? It's more about the person you become, which is always going to be the case, because dates will come and go, women will come and go, like, and that's fun. That's the bonus, and it will change your life. Like it changed my life. I'm not lonely anymore. I'm so much more confident, direct, flirtier, I'm more polarizing. Um, I almost got rid of my nice guy tendencies, and now I can just like talk to girls and flirt with them and be super direct, and it's just like I just feel like the man. And obviously getting having experiences, going on dates, bringing them back to my place or whatever the case might be in different countries as well, is fun. It's great. I love it, right? But in that early days of building the skill set, when I wasn't getting any of these experiences, the one thing that really kept me going was the deeper level development. So try and really view it through that lens, if you're struggling. And then I would also say, you know, cold approach is not for the faint of heart. So if you're struggling, mm, you know, if it's really like bugging you and it's negatively affecting so many different areas of life, or getting really bad reactions all the time, and you're not really getting any positive reference experiences, then I would say just take a break. Take a break, take stock, try and understand what's going on. Don't keep on, drilling down with more reps when clearly people aren't receptive to it. Clearly you're getting bad, really, really bad reactions on a consistent basis. If that's you, then don't, yeah, just stop. I wouldn't even encourage you to keep on going, because you're just going to hurt your mental health, mate. So don't do that. Um, but if you're not that guy, then like I said, if you're getting some positive experiences or positive reference experiences, then yeah, just keep on going at it, keep on chipping away, and yeah, eventually you'll hopefully see progress like I did. But I will also say, as a final recommendation, just get help. Yeah, ask for somebody or ask for feedback from somebody who's been in your shoes and can see where you're going wrong. It is so valuable. And I'm somebody who's done that. I've done the solo approaching. I've tried to learn the skill by myself, and I got some success. But I would have saved myself so much more time if I just reached out to somebody early on. And yes, there is some valor in being able to get some results by myself, and it's nice to be able to say that, But ultimately, if what we want is dates, and if what we want is to reach the mountain peak or to reach the pinnacle as early as possible to save us wasting time, then why not just find somebody who can help you, right? Adopt the student's mentality and understand that there might be a lot of things that I'm doing wrong that I just don't know about. You don't know what you don't know, right? It's because one thing I really struggled with when I was doing solo approach before I got coached is that kind of rhymes. Before I did solo approach, before getting coached, bars. I should be a rapper. Anyway, one thing I struggled with before I did approach, sorry, before I got coached, and I was in my solo days, was the fact that I there were so many things that I knew that I could improve in, but because I was just by myself, I really struggled to prioritize what needed to change, right? So one approach, it might be, okay, I was talking too fast, but then the next approach, it could be I was I didn't get right in front, and then the next approach, I might have done a good approach at the beginning, but then when it came to the close, I was very tiptoey, not direct, and I didn't sound confident, right? So all of these sticking points were identified by my coach when I got coached. But it's funny because at that moment, when I listened to the feedback from Ephraim, for example, I realized that, hold on, these are probably issues that were happening in my earlier approaches back in my solo days, but I didn't have the structure to address them one by one, because we can only do so much at once when you're by yourself. You know, there's so much going on. I mean, like I said, approach is difficult. So your tensions or your emotions are already high. You know, you're already flustered. You're going in for approach after approach after approach. There isn't even much time to really take a second to think about what the issue is, right? Unless you're very, very meticulous. And even then, you still run into the issue of not actually knowing what the issue is, right? So there's one aspect of this problem where you identify the issues, but there's so many that you don't even know where to start, and it becomes overwhelming because you don't have anybody to, let's say, prioritize what needs to be done first, and then second, and then third. But then the other issue related to this problem is that you can't even identify the issues in the first place because, like I said, you're overwhelmed. So you don't even know what is like shooting you in the foot. And it was funny because I had those revelations as soon as I got coached. I was like, oh, I'm doing that. Especially when you see yourself on camera or you hear your audio, you start realizing, damn, I don't sound as good as I thought I did, or I don't look as good as I thought I did, right? Which isn't bad. I mean, that's just part of the game. That's part of the learning process. That's part of the learning curve. And it's funny because once you identify them and then you change them, then everything just smooth, flows quickly. And it's great because then you're not so much in your head thinking, okay, what's the issue here? Like, what's the problem? Because now you already know what the plan is in terms of where you need to fix certain issues. So now you have a lot more conviction in knowing, okay, I'm confident in myself that I can do this, right? I'm confident that I can I'm confident in my approach in terms of this, like the open and the conversation. All I know is I need to work on the close. And now you can pour or you can direct your mental energy towards focusing on improving the close rather than being unsure and worrying about whether or not your open is good. You know what I mean? So it's all about really concentrating your effort towards what actually needs to be fixed and then being confident in what's already sorted. And that's what a coach provides, right? Because time is of the essence and you only have so much mental bandwidth. So you can't just be out here, you can't be out here like trying to fix a million different things at once. So that's really important, I would say. And that's really my final piece of advice, which is stop trying to do it all by yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to come to me. It just means you have to go to somebody, right? But yeah, just do the best you can to get a second pair of eyes to look at you or to listen to you as well. And yeah, I think that's really it. Honestly, I mean, you know, I'm somebody who, when I struggled at first, I think that the power of that first approach, when I had that first approach on September 14th, 2024, I think the power of that approach was so intense that I was willing to embrace the suck period. I was willing to embrace that difficult learning period because I knew that there was something there. I knew that this could work because I got a positive reference experience. And I think when you have that positive reference experience where the girl tells you, keep on doing this, or you get your first number, right? Even if she flakes, at least you know that there is something there, right? This could work, right? And if it can work, then you just have to bide your time, be patient. Because, we also live in a time where everybody wants microwave results, everybody wants instant success. People struggle with instant gratification, the idea of delaying gratification or working on a skill set. Like a lot of people, especially younger guys, we feel somewhat entitled to being really good at something without really putting in the reps. But my friend, confidence isn't earned overnight. It isn't, right? It takes time. It took me time to get more confident to a point where I stopped caring about what other people thought during my approach, to a point where I was able to be convicted, right? To a point where I could own my desires and be completely transparent and direct from beginning to end, right? And that translated not just in from the approach, but it translated into the dates, right? Because it's one thing to approach the girls, but then it's a whole different ball game when it comes to actually going on the dates, right? And conducting yourself properly on a date and leading the interaction and being able to escalate and do all these things, which are a completely different ball game. And I was incompetent, right? I was incompetent when I started. Even when I got my first dates, right? Like I remember the first ever date I went on cold approach was a train wreck, right? So you can imagine I'm so happy that I got this date, but then the date happened. I took her to an art museum, and to be fair, at the art museum there was some nice conversation. We were building rapport, but then I took her to this like tea like cafe, and it was in the evening, and we sat in this awkward like booth, not booth, like a corner of a like dining area, and I was so nervous and I didn't even really know what to say, and it just didn't feel great. It didn't go well. I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of felt like a fish out of water. And that's understandable because I hadn't been on a date in a really long time at that point, right? And it was my first ever date from Code Approach. So, it would have been kind of crazy for me to think that it was going to go smashingly well at the first attempt, right? And so I just had to understand that this is part of the process. I'm warming up to getting better. I will improve as time goes on. I just need to be patient and trust in that process, but also put in action, right? There's a combination of aggressive action but patience, right? So you have to be aggressive with the reps you put in and really put in the work. And of course, these are guided reps, right? Not just repeating the same mistakes, but actually iterating and improving. But at the same time, when it comes to the outcome, patience, my friend, patience. Yeah, patience, young Padawan. Please, don't be so quick to rush. Don't be so entitled. I had to catch myself at moments where I thought, damn it, like why isn't this working? Like why aren't I getting what I want? And then I realized, Ian, chill. Like who are you? Who do you think you are? Like relax. Yeah, you haven't even been coached, and you know who's to say that you have to get results right now, right? Like who makes that decision, right? Um, so yeah, just have some. I guess humility is the right word, but I think patience is a better word because patience is under it makes you it's something that you have when you know that success is later down the road. You just have to take every step and trust in that process. And so yeah, let's just try and break out of this modern day mentality of everything happens immediately, right? Just because you can order Uber Eats overnight, or just because you can order DoorDash and get everything quickly, or just because you're used to swiping on an app, doesn't mean that that's how the real world works, right? Sometimes you have to put in reps. And again, that's not to say that it will take you a year to get your first date. Sometimes it can just take you a month. For some people, that's how long it takes, but everybody's at a different place. So again, it just takes self awareness to understand where you're at. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my advice. Keep on going if you know deep down inside that there's something about you in terms of your dateability, fuckability, and you believe that you are somebody who should be seeing success purely because you have gotten positive results, like well, positive reference experiences, then it's only a matter of time, right? But don't continue banging your head against the wall. And if you have the ability to invest in yourself, just invest in yourself and save yourself the hassle, right? So I'm gonna go through a few comments before I head off. So a lot of people say hi, what's up, everyone who said hi. Quite a few comments of people saying hi. Somebody said they like my glasses. Thank you, I appreciate that. Adnan Second Life says, "Oh hey Ian, yeah, I would say if you're struggling with cold approaching, then find an environment with lots of beautiful women, and I mean a lot, and then you have to try it for yourself and see how it goes." Yeah, I mean sometimes location is the bottleneck for people, so yeah, try and find a place where the kind of girls you like are there, and yeah, immerse yourself in the skill. So Adnan says, but of course, it depends on the weather and the time and how popular it is with people. Yeah, that's a fair point. Um, so Adnan also says, so what are you saying? Are you saying that if I get coaching and feedback, I can get dates in less time than in solo? Because you have to bear in mind that there is texting that you have to deal with and planning for the date. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you get coaching, then you can identify your sticking points much quicker and with much more precision, and therefore you can fix them quicker, and then you can find success earlier. And so, yes, it will save you time, right? And that doesn't just apply to the approach itself. It applies to the approach. It applies to the text thing. Although everything else sorts itself out once you get good at cold approach. Like this idea of texting and even the dates. Like once you sorted out the ability to approach the girl and close and set up the date, then texting and the date itself, it just sorts itself out naturally, because what ends up happening is you go from scarcity to abundance. And so because you're in abundance, you're not obsessing over how to text the girl. You're not obsessing over shit tests. You're not obsessing over double texting her, because you already have options. And so through that abundance, the texting game sorts itself out. The way that you conduct yourself on dates sorts itself out, because now you have more dates and more opportunities to get under your belt, and you grow as a result. So all this stuff about texting, I mean, not to attack you, but like it doesn't really, it sorts itself out, right? Those are things that will sort itself out once you've actually learned the skill properly. Um, So Adnan says also you have to kind of pay for coaching and stuff, which can help, don't get me wrong, and can be helpful, but after coaching you need to do it all by yourself with some feedback. Yeah, I mean, coaching is just a period, right? So you get coached and then you have the skill set, you know what to do, and then you have to run with it afterwards, right? But you still get support, right? So, you still get support after you've been coached, even if it's virtual, so that you don't slip back into old habits. Um, but yeah, and of course, yeah, of course, you want to get a coach that you trust, that you resonate with, somebody who you believe can get you results. And so yeah, it's up to you to make that decision. Otherwise, anyway, that's 37 minutes on the stream. Thank you for all the questions, Adnan. It's Friday night. I'm gonna order some food and then prepare for the weekend. I mean, to be fair, I'm not doing too much this weekend. J. Cole's album came out. I don't know how many of you guys are J. Cole fans, but I'm a fan, so I'm gonna listen to the new album and then add my favorite tracks. And then yeah, I'm gonna be filming some infields next week, hopefully on Monday. So there will be more uh, content on the way. And then yeah, I had a coaching call. Well, I had an application coaching call with somebody who was interested in my services. It went pretty well. So we'll see if he locks that in. Um, but yeah, hopefully looking forward to coaching him at some point. But again, we'll see if that transpires. But he seemed pretty confident. So yeah, we'll see if that ends up coming through. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a good weekend. And yeah, another live stream will be tomorrow. I'm still on the streak. I've been going every single day. I will not stop. When I commit to something, I commit to it. I'm not going to back down. Even if I get the flu, even if they try to chop my legs off, they're going to have to take the army. They're going to have to bring the army, the Navy SEALs to come and get me from doing a live stream every single day in February. I'm showing up. That's why I'm showing up for you boys, yeah? Anyway, enough pumping my chest. Good night, boys. Peace out.